there's a significant percentage of people in our population who have a hyperreactivity to common environmental chemicals, things like cigarette smoke and paint fumes and solvents and cleaning products, ammonia, various irritating chemicals. And the more extreme of these individuals have what we call multiple chemical sensitivity syndrome. And these are individuals who are so sensitive to these everyday chemicals. They have problems involving multiple organ systems, and in the more extreme cases are actually disabled by their inability to function in ordinary society, where every day of our lives we're exposed to a host of these environmental chemicals.
A few years ago, a taxi cab driver from Las Vegas emailed me to say, I was making good money driving a taxi, but I had to resign because the other driver would spray it with air freshener. Eventually, I got so sick, I had to quit. This taxi cab driver is just one of millions of Americans who are desperately trying to hold on to jobs that are damaging their health and making them sicker with each day that passes.
Allison Johnson developed multiple chemical sensitivity in 1973, and through her own experience and the experiences of her chemically sensitive daughters, she has gained a wide knowledge of the field. Visitors to her website, AllisonJohnsonMCS.com, can read excerpts from her 3 books and play several of her videos. In 2001, she founded the Chemical Sensitivity Foundation, which she chairs.
People just don't understand how sensitive you can be and how sick you can become from, household cleaning products or their perfume or their aftershave or little things like that.
When I would go and do a painting bid, and I'd be trying to impress the customer and give them all kinds of information and that sort of thing, I would sometimes lose my ability to speak. And this was very distressing to me. I've later come to associate that with certain types of exposures to perfumes and fabric softeners, but at the time I didn't know what was going on. All I knew is that I would lose my ability to concentrate well enough, lose my ability to think clearly enough to express myself, and I would just stand there looking kind of stupid. And obviously I stopped winning contracts at that point.
People who develop multiple chemical sensitivity, or MCS, begin to react to chemicals that they encounter in everyday life in substances such as paint, perfume, pesticide, cleaning products, detergents, fabric softeners, gasoline, diesel exhaust, cigarette smoke, new carpets, building materials, and air fresheners.
I'm a high school history teacher from Washington State, and I became very ill working in my classroom. Mold was discovered in my classroom, and I became very sensitive to mold and later developed multiple chemical sensitivity. As a result of this, my workplace environment became very difficult. I became sensitive to some of the products we were using in the classroom, magic markers, whiteboard markers, the shampoos they were using to clean the carpet, and some of the cleaners that they were using. I initially discovered this by losing my voice. I became very hoarse, and as a coach and as a teacher, you can understand how that became very difficult to do my job. Ironically, I was an All-American wrestler in college, and everybody was very surprised when I became very ill and had many different symptoms, headaches. I gained a considerable amount of weight. I had a lot of fatigue, and basically was very lethargic, didn't have a lot of energy as a result of these acquired sensitivity. My workplace environment did improve a little bit once the school decided to move me into another classroom that was not infected with mold. It was very challenging and very difficult to do my job. The students, I had to ask not to wear perfume, which was awkward for some of these younger kids that really didn't have an understanding or a sensitivity to the possibility that people react to various chemicals.
This is why I care about fragrances and sensitivity to fragrances. It has affected my life. and I have grandchildren and children, and I care about the future for them with respect to them being in the workplace, their being hospitalized, and in my own condition, my case, if and when I ever go to a nursing home. So I care about this. I did not inherit my fragrance sensitivity. I started with a chronic cough in 1991. And at that time, we were going through a house renovation. The cough became progressively worse, and eventually I was hospitalized in 1994 with a life-threatening pneumonia. I was intubated for 3 weeks. I was in the hospital for 4 weeks. But even once I came out of the hospital, I continued to have this chronic cough. I saw multiple doctors, multiple tests, and no one could exactly tell me why. But to this day, I still have a cough. And what triggers the cough now, I think because my respiratory is sensitive, are things like fragrances. And that can be difficult, particularly if you're in an elevator and someone gets on, and they can have a lovely perfume on, or hairspray, or whatever, and I start coughing. And it can be embarrassing. It can be very embarrassing. The worst situation is if you're in a meeting and you're with friends you like, you know, and you want to turn and you want to say, that's lovely, that fragrance you have, lovely, but I need to tell you I'm going to start a cough spasm because I can't tolerate it. So it affects me every day.
Dr. Christine Oliver is an associate professor at Harvard Medical School and served for many years as co-director of occupational and environmental medicine at Massachusetts General Hospital.
Multiple chemical sensitivity, or MCS, is a multi-system disease that is characterized by symptoms associated with exposure to low levels of chemical vapors. These levels of exposure are commonly found in the ambient environment. Systems that are affected by MCS include the respiratory system, the neurologic system, the gastrointestinal system, the skin in some cases. For those with less severe illness and disease, symptoms may include cough, shortness of breath, headache, in association with exposure to chemicals on an elevator, or when they open a magazine and have a scented insert in the magazine. For those who are more severely affected, however, symptoms can be truly disabling. They interfere with a person's ability to engage in gainful employment. They interfere with a person's ability to use public transportation. They interfere with a person's ability to live in a multifamily housing unit. They interfere with family life.
One reason that the medical profession has found it difficult to understand MCS is that patients with MCS can have a wide variety of symptoms as a result of chemical exposures, with different patients having different symptoms. A given patient, however, will usually have the same symptom in response to a given exposure, perhaps getting a headache after exposure to paint, or getting arthritic pains after exposure to natural gas.
My name is Chris Markham. I'm a retired photographer. This is my wife Maureen, and she's a retired nurse. And I developed a breathing problem they call MCS, probably back in about 2013, about mid-2013. It started after our house was destroyed in the Sandy storm. A tree took it out. And we lived different places until we rented this home here. In the meantime, I went back to the house, which was quite damaged. And I crawled through all the spaces in the house and the lumber to salvage whatever I could. And I did that for 2 months every day. And I didn't have a problem in there at the time, but we're thinking now that might have been the thing that triggered it off, because I never had a breathing problem. And then fabric softeners began to bother me, and our detergent also was a real detergent. I didn't really realize what it was, but I began to smell it more. And every now and then I'd get a coughing fit, and then it was over with. So eventually we said, maybe we just get rid of this stuff here. So we did. We just dumped it out and we got the free stuff. But still, I began choking and coughing more, and it just increased gradually. Then, I guess it was in 2014, wife was working then at the hospital as a nurse, and to come home from work and things would be fine and go about our business. And I had my little attacks here and there. Some days I actually had no attacks at all. In 2013 and part of 2014, but we don't know why. Well, one day she walked in the house, a Tuesday afternoon, came home, and I began choking and coughing and smelled everything she had in her. It was apparently an air freshener, though I didn't know what it was. I said, my gosh, what's on your clothes? Take them off. So she said, there's nothing on my clothes. And I said, where'd you have your coat? It's choking me. So she believed me, though she really couldn't smell much. She has Parkinson's, and they don't smell as well as somebody who doesn't have Parkinson's. And so she put her coat down the cellar and took her we changed her clothes, we put them on the back porch, but still in her hair. And she washed her hair, and I was better after that, more or less. And then this happened every single day for, I don't know, 8 or 9 months. And it was a routine now. When she came home from work from the hospital, she would have to change, but she would always wash her hair every other day, whatever. Sometimes I was okay with it, eating dinner. Other times I wasn't, and she would eat in the dining room, and I'd have to stay at the kitchen table to eat. Otherwise, I'd begin choking and bring up a lot of phlegm and trying to eat something, forget that. So I just go in the bathroom and take care of myself until it was over. Sometimes half an hour, sometimes an hour and a half.
Fabric softener and perfume in the ambient air clings to clothing and upholstered furniture in much the same way cigarette smoke does. That creates a major problem for people who react to fragrances.
We used to love to walk.
We can't walk now because whenever we go out walking, there's so much fragrance from the fabric softeners in the air. We can't even go for a walk now. We can't go to relatives' house for holidays.
Not together,
because he mainly stays home because of the fabric softener, and he gets attacked, so can't even go out on holidays now.
Yeah, I've missed 2 Thanksgivings and 2 Christmas Eves, a big thing with my aunt. I used to run. I used to do stuff all day long, work all day, run, exercise. I'm 74 now. When I was 7, I was doing pull-ups, push-ups, a machine. Nothing to stop me.
Some nights he's been so bad I wanted to call the EMR, but he doesn't want me to call the EMR and bring him to the hospital because the hospital has the fragrances, and he's afraid he's going to get worse, so he won't go to the emergency room.
Chris took a video of himself having an attack the night after we had filmed him.
I guess the medicine is wearing off, and you guys were here. What's happening? It's running down mostly the left side here, getting caught down in here. He gets hung up here. But you should tell him about the fragrances that were on her clothes and where they were coming from when she came home from the hospital. You should know how this came about. Do you want to tell him about that? The stuff they put in your office?
Oh, you mean when I was working?
Yeah, when you were working at the hospital.
It's
yeah.
A mechanical, it runs on battery, and it has fragrance softener, and every few seconds it shoots off perfume. And it's high up on the wall, so people didn't realize it was there at first. So it would keep shooting off the perfume. When I realized what it was doing, it was running by a battery. So I took the battery out, and everybody was thankful that they didn't have to smell it anymore.
And what about the stuff under the desk out in the other area?
Oh yeah, it was like little disc fragrance things that adhered to the wall, and nobody really realized it was there at first, so we had to go searching for them and remove them.
The thing is that this was on her clothes, and she didn't know where it was coming from. It was something new. She'd been working there 48 years, right? And one day it started, as I told you. Then it was almost a year, 8, 9 months. She came home and said, I found out what it is. And she told me. Actually, I want to tell you this. She worked at the hospital. She ripped it off the wall. She's the kind that took out the battery. And she told me tell me what happened to your hands when you took there was a pocket under the desk she took out. These discs, and they smelled quite a bit apparently. Tell me what happened when you took it out with your hands.
Yeah, the smell got on my hands. So.
Hey, but you couldn't get it off. She had like a hard time removing the smell. So that was unbelievable. So now there's my exposure. So that really was my first exposure because of a medical facility.
Air filled with air freshener is not fresh air. There are a lot of places in America where one can still find fresh air, and here's one of them.
This is wonderful fresh air here. This is probably some of the best air in the world. This is Reed State Park. It's a wonderful place where I come every chance I get, maybe once a week, with a book or a picnic lunch. I actually wrote several of my books sitting right here on these rocks, looking out at this beautiful ocean.
In June of 2009, the CDC put on its internal website an indoor air environmental quality policy intended to maintain good indoor air quality in buildings in which its employees worked. So, among other things, the CDC policy states scented or fragranced products are prohibited at all times in all interior space owned, rented, or leased by the CDC. And this includes the use of the following products: incense, candles or reed diffusers, fragrance-emitting devices of any kind, wall-mounted devices similar to fragrance-emitting devices that operate automatically or by pushing a button to dispense deodorizers or disinfectants, potpourri, plug-in or spray air fresheners, urinal or toilet blocks, other fragrance deodorizer, reodorizer products. In addition, the CDC encourages employees to be as fragrance-free as possible when they arrive in the workplace. Fragrance is not appropriate for a professional work environment, and the use of some products with fragrance may be detrimental to the health of workers with the following diseases: chemical sensitivities, allergies, asthma, and chronic headaches and migraines.
It is important to note that the EPA website lists air fresheners as a source of indoor air pollution.
The CDC indoor air quality policy is a very important policy and provides an example of what we should be doing in every workplace in this country. I think all workplaces should be fragrance-free. The number of people who are chemically sensitive and or with diagnosed MCS is increasing on a daily basis. A fragrance-free policy allows those individuals who are chemically sensitive to continue their employment. As a result, they do not have to turn to Social Security disability for income. Those who are not the beneficiaries of a fragrance-free policy are often unable to work and do find themselves on Social Security disability.
We want to keep these people in the workforce. We don't want these people on public assistance, and it's vitally important that we make our workplaces free of chemical pollutants.
Patients with MCS and physicians who may be treating them need to remember that if it's too good to be true, it probably is too good to be true. There are no miraculous cures out there, at least none that I know about. Patients with MCS travel great distances, sometimes to receive what is touted as a miracle cure. They spend lots of money to receive this so-called miracle cure, and in the end, it is not a miracle cure. It often makes symptoms worse rather than better, and at the end of the day, it does not cure the disease. Until we better understand the pathophysiologic mechanisms, we're not going to be able to do much better than avoidance of exposures, in my opinion. And to better understand the pathophysiologic mechanisms, we need funded research in this area.
Funding for research in chemical sensitivity in this country does not measure up to the size of the health problem, the public health problem that it is. Japan does a much better job than we do in studying this problem and making funds available for serious researchers. I believe the reason that we haven't seen more research funding is political rather than scientific. There are commercial interests, the manufacturers of consumer products that pollute the air that we breathe, and the workers' comp insurance companies, and others that perceive that if we knew more about this problem, they would be liable for people suffering. And frankly, they don't want it studied.
The website of the Chemical Sensitivity Foundation contains a bibliography of research articles on chemical sensitivity that have been published in peer-reviewed journals in the US, Japan, France, Italy, Spain, Denmark, Sweden, and other countries. The entire 13-page Centers for Disease Control policy on indoor environmental quality is also available on that website, as are many other documents relating to fragrance-free workplaces. On October 23, 2016, an important new study was published in Air Quality and Atmospheric Health by Dr. Ann Steinemann, a civil and environmental engineer with a PhD from Stanford. She was formerly a professor at Georgia Tech and the University of Washington and is currently the chair of Sustainable Cities at the University of Melbourne. Her article, titled Fragranced Consumer Products, Exposures and Effects from Emissions, describes the results of her nationally representative population survey in the United States. Among the most important results are the following. 53.2% of the Americans surveyed would prefer fragrance-free workplaces. 19.7% of Americans surveyed would not prefer fragrance-free workplaces. The other respondents did not express a preference. This means that over twice as many of those surveyed favor fragrance-free workplaces as do not. More than twice as many customers would choose hotels and airplanes without fragranced air.
Dr. Lee Still, an epidemiologist, published a study in the American Journal of Epidemiology in November of 2000, which documented that over 200,000 of people who served in the first Gulf War are now chronically ill. That's over 1/3 of those who served.
In the mid-1990s, I commanded Walter Reed Army Medical Center. I continued to work on looking for causes for the illnesses suffered by many Gulf War veterans, illnesses that clearly were more than stress-related. I looked at vaccines, I looked at exposure to smokes, to other toxic chemicals, petrochemicals, and so forth, all that were part of that battlefield experience. And I came to the conclusion that at least one of the explanations was multiple chemical sensitivity, something where a variety of toxic elements, even at low levels by themselves in combination, may in susceptible individuals be causing these illnesses. And I believe so much more work needs to be done in that, but it is clearly one of the explanations.
I was privileged to work with Allison Johnson as she did research on the role of chemical exposure to the unexplained illnesses of Gulf War veterans. Her works on exposure to toxins and chemical sensitivity with their attendant health effects are landmarks in a poorly understood field.
Since I've been back from the Gulf War, I also noticed that a lot of things bother me that never bothered me before. Different perfume, different cologne, gas, different smell of even smoke or cigarettes. I just automatically get sick, And sometimes it takes me days or weeks to recover. One day I was on the elevator and someone got on there with some loud perfume. And then all of a sudden it hit me and I got lightheaded.
Roy's blood pressure shot up so high that the emergency room staff thought he was having a heart attack. He ended up spending 4 days in the hospital.
As a paratrooper, I had extensive exposure to jet fuel and jet fumes. and it never bothered me. After coming back from the Gulf War and having been in the oil fields for that length of time, breathing in the noxious fumes on a daily basis, now just the smell of diesel fuel makes me severely nauseated, dizzy, and very sick. Perfumes, I don't wear any type of cologne because it makes me nauseous.
Terry's extreme sensitivity to chemicals makes him especially vulnerable to perfume inserts in magazines.
I hate it. Somewhere in the magazine you'll be reading and they'll have a perfume advertisement. And when you open that page, it releases that perfume. I had it hit me one time. I was just going through the magazine. I opened it up and this was apparently a pretty potent perfume that put me immediately into an asthma attack. And I had only just been diagnosed with asthma since I had come back from over there. The asthma attack I had increased during the night. I used my inhalers. Went to bed anyway. Then my breathing got extremely bad. They sent a rescue unit to get me because I was in the rescue unit. I stopped breathing 3 times. They took me straight back into the emergency room. Continued giving me treatments. About the time they thought I'd be all right, I'd quit breathing again. And it took a couple of days to get me back to breathing like I was supposed to. All because of a dad-burned little advertisement for a perfume. Cost me a couple of days in the hospital. I had a $580 rescue bill. I had over a $2,000 emergency room bill and approximately $3,000 hospital bill. Not getting any assistance from, I don't have no Medicare because I haven't been approved yet. And I'm not getting anything from the government. I had to pay these bills myself.
I'm Tara Batista. I'm a registered nurse at the VA hospital in Bedford, Massachusetts. I joined the Army when I was 18, and at age 19, I was sent to the Gulf War in 1990 and 91. I had exposure to carc paint, nerve agent, petroleum products, chlorine gas, oil well fires, all sorts of chemicals, and developed chemical sensitivity, migraines, multiple symptoms since then. So after the Army, I became an RN. It was extremely difficult with being chemically sensitive and allergic to every scented product like perfume, scented hair products, etc. And it's surprising that I had such a rough time just in school and then in every job I had, because in nursing school they teach you not to wear scented products because it causes vasospasm, bronchospasm, and allergic reactions in patients as well as staff. After that school, I got a job at a prison. It was one of the early jobs. There was a doctor that worked there. I had an accommodation and asked everyone, the supervisor asked everybody to refrain from wearing scented products. One day I remember when I had a reaction to a staff member's perfume, I put the mask on. I tried to avoid her. She needed to be near me. I explained, please, I'm having a problem with the perfume. The doctor also was heavily scented, and the doctor actually told that person not to apologize, that I basically didn't have a right to be there, is what she felt.
Under the Americans with Disabilities Act, covered employers are required to provide reasonable accommodations to qualified job applicants and employees with disabilities.
In 2008, I started working as a registered nurse at the VA hospital in Bedford, Massachusetts. It was a struggle in the beginning because I was exposed with chemical sensitivity, exposed to scented products. My boss at the time saw me struggling and saw I was a good nurse, so she had a PhD person come and do an educational training about multiple chemical sensitivity, explaining why, with rationale to the staff, why they needed to refrain from wearing scented products, because I'm sensitive and get very sick. I had to work sick routinely because I didn't have the accommodation in place yet. It took time for the board to decide, and it took a long time. And I kept having to go outside and get air. It's a big unit, so it did help. And I always had to sit in front of an air conditioning, unit to have air on me constantly. But I was sick constantly in the beginning. It was such a struggle. I ended up asking to go to evenings when a position opened because I knew the staff on evenings. There was only one person who wore scented products, and I thought I could maybe appeal to his kindness. So out of desperation, I requested going on evenings. And then a new manager came who enforced the accommodation. All I had to do if I had a reaction to something or somebody is email her, and she would have a private conversation, and that would help. One of my biggest problems was so many days I would develop a migraine from the staff's perfume, and I had to continue working. I couldn't afford to leave, and I just remember how difficult it was, and I really think the training as an Army medic is what got me through it, because you have to keep going. They trained me very well, and I care about the patients, and I didn't feel it was correct to leave despite pain and suffering, so I soldiered through. It's late in the season, but this used to be covered with morning glory vine. They're purple. They're all seeding now, but we've had a frost. So I spend all my days out here recuperating in the garden. I find it very grounding and nurturing. When you're sick a lot, you need something to rejuvenate yourself. I'll show you the river. So all of these rocks, I moved in buckets from up the street. They're all covered with leaves, but so I redid the river basically. And this area, all the way back there, I made a path with rocks. And I sit out here with a cup of tea or coffee and relax. And it's beautiful. You hear the flicker overhead. Lots of birds and animals. And then the sound of the water when it's high. It's slow right now because we've had a drought. It's just my little piece of heaven.
For almost 2 decades, I've been writing books and making documentaries on the subject of MCS. In the 18 years that have passed since I made my first documentary, Multiple Chemical Sensitivity, How Chemical Exposures May Be Affecting Your Health, more and more people have succumbed to this condition. I sent a copy of my film to Bernie Sanders because I had followed his work in Congress investigating the health problems caused by new carpet and the illnesses reported by veterans of the 1991 Gulf War, illnesses that are often referred to as Gulf War syndrome. I was so surprised one day when Bernie Sanders actually called me up and he told me he thought my film was the best presentation on MCS he'd ever seen. He then asked me if there's anything he could do to help. So I told him, well, if he'd be willing to write me a letter of endorsement, then I could send that along with a copy of the film to some members of Congress.
One of the things that we uncovered at EPA doing investigations of releases of hazardous material is large numbers of people where there are releases start to develop what we call chemical sensitivity. And so we're seeing health effects to the public around hazardous sites like the World Trade Center a year, 2 years, 3 years down the line, where people are now sensitive to chemicals. A little bit of perfume, for example, which would not affect anybody, can make people deathly ill.
Since 9/11, the smell of gasoline and diesel fuel is such that I don't get out and even fuel my own vehicles. I don't even want it on my hands because of the odor. Being around the job sites and being around the smell of the diesel and the gasoline, I am so symptomatic to that involvement that I was constantly getting problems with my throat. I would wind up going hoarse. and I would lose my voice sometimes. The next thing you know, from a sore throat, I'd have a chest infection. I get lung infections, then I get pneumonia. And this never, ever happened to me before in my life. Now the smell of smoke actually sickens me, sometimes giving me headaches. I know I can't use any type of cologne or aftershave. I can't take that smell. It's sort of like a burning inside my nostrils.
We were one of the first units into the South Tower. Last thing I remember seeing actually was a helicopter trying to go to one of the towers to get people off the tower. Hearing, someone say it was going to blow, and a humongous fireball. It looked like a meteor coming at us.
Bonnie had never had asthma before 9/11, but by the time the day was over, she had had 3 bad asthma attacks.
People just don't understand not being able to catch your breath, not being able to fill your lungs. It's such a horrible, horrible feeling. It feels like someone's crushing your chest and basically sucking everything out of you. I can't be in restaurants because, God forbid, someone has perfume on. I can go into a fit. I can feel nauseous and throw up. My throat can close up. The multiple chemical sensitivity issues that have come from 9/11 have not been addressed. Household cleaners. Oh my God. You just might as well pack me up at that point and just send me to the hospital.
I've been tracking the firefighters post 9/11, and what many have told me, and their medical reports have shown that they've become hypersensitive to other chemicals that are out there. They could be fine for a while. They have respiratory problems. They run 3/4 time, meaning that they're not on active duty, and boom, they'll come across perfume or other chemicals out there, even household cleaning chemicals, and they'll just become immobilized. Some of them just become so sick that they basically can't function on a daily level.
Before she developed MCS at age 32, Jen Duncan had a lot going for her in life. She had master's degrees from MIT and New York University. She had excellent creative jobs, and she enjoyed dance and yoga and playing African drums. I have spoken with hundreds and hundreds of chemically sensitive people during the last 4 decades. But Jen is definitely the worst case of chemical sensitivity I have ever encountered. She is way, way out on the end of the bell curve. She stands as an extreme example of the neurological damage that chemical exposure can induce in certain individuals.
I had developed chemical sensitivity prior to 9/11. The office building where I worked was doing renovations, and after prolonged exposure over several weeks in a poorly ventilated area to a number of those chemicals, I had a number of strange symptoms and unusual things that were going on that then later on we realized was developed into multiple chemical sensitivity and other chemical injury symptoms. After 9/11, with all the exposure of the smoke and the fumes blowing over from Manhattan into Brooklyn, I definitely experienced exacerbation and got even more debilitated. And, being exposed just to cologne or if I was out around traffic or somebody smoking a cigarette, that it would make me disintegrate and have the disorientation and the trouble breathing and the great pain, joint pain. Spelling is hard. Numbers are hard. I have dyslexia sometimes now. Like I always check and double check I would write an envelope and it would be returned because I mix up numbers. I never had a problem with numbers before. You know, I did calculus and differential equations, and if somebody asks me numbers or to spell something, it's really hard. Sometimes it helps me. I know I knew a little sign language before, so I'll usually spell out just to help me get something physical to get the numbers or letters out. Sorry, I'm getting fatigued, so I'm trying to just ride the waves and hold my energy together to get through.
Believe it or not, that was Jen on one of her good days. We had also filmed her the day after a doctor's appointment. Jen told us that exposure to air fresheners and diesel fumes in the private medical transport that had taken her to that appointment had caused this temporary but sharp decline in her condition.
Another striking thing is that many of our patients are much more reactive to strong odors than they were before. Not always with exactly the same kind of reaction that they'll experience when they're exposed to cigarette smoke or bus exhaust, but they notice these odors more and find themselves reacting physically unpleasantly to these odors in ways they never did before. I have patients who cannot walk into a department store cosmetic area without experiencing shortness of breath and chest tightness in ways they never did before. I have patients who cannot get on an elevator where someone is wearing strong perfume or cologne without experiencing fairly intense respiratory reactions. We don't always understand why this is so, but it is extremely commonly reported among our World Trade Center responders. And many of our patients say that they're simply unable to wear fragrances themselves or be around others, family members, friends who wear such fragrances because they simply can't tolerate them.
Many people with MCS become so sensitive to fragrances that they virtually become prisoners in their own home, unable to attend church or other worship services, classes, work, or social gatherings because of the fragrance products used by others. To make matters even worse, some of those who insist that MCS is just a psychologically based condition state that these people are suffering from agoraphobia, or fear of crowds. That's as cruel as saying to a paraplegic in a wheelchair, "Too bad you don't like to walk."
Giving up wearing fragranced products can enable someone else to avoid giving up their job. That sacrifice and act of kindness on your part may be well worth making. Minimizing the use of fragranced products in public places and homes will also enable people who have a strong reaction to fragrances to enjoy attending various events and to return to the social life they miss so much.
8 years ago, I met our friend Lovey Erstelin when she moved into Highland Green. A friend called me up and said, "I have a new neighbor who's looking for somebody to attend the Metropolitan Opera broadcast at the local theater." And so I was eager to go. So I gave Lovey a ride to the first one. And when I dropped her off at her house afterwards, I said, "I'm really embarrassed to ask you this, but I'm sensitive to perfume. Would you mind too much not wearing perfume the next time we go to the opera?" And she was so nice about saying, "Of course, I just won't wear it."
Yes, I remember that. And I had quite a few colognes and perfumes. Some of them were from my sister, who had lots of them, who traveled a lot, and she was always bringing gifts and so on. So I had to do something with them, and so I wore them occasionally, not always, but occasionally. And so when you asked me not to wear it, and I thought about it because I noticed that some of the women here were not wearing colognes, and I thought, well, there is a problem with allergies, etc., including my husband, who also is allergic to certain things, and I said that might help him also. I was willing to give up my expensive French colognes for Allison because I realized that friendship is much more important than colognes.
My name is Benny Howard. I'm the Acting Director of the Office of Disability Policy at the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development in Washington, D.C. Federal laws, specifically the Fair Housing Act, Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act, and the Americans with Disability Act, prohibits discrimination on the basis of disability. HUD considers multiple chemical sensitivity to be a disability under these laws.
Dr. Ann Steineman has analyzed the secret ingredients in several leading fragranced products like air fresheners and laundry products. She has found significant numbers of toxic chemicals in these products. Dr. Steineman's website contains extensive information about her studies. In the last couple of decades, there has been a rapid and alarming acceleration in the number of people reporting they have developed chemical sensitivity. In 2009, Professors Stanley Caress and Ann Steineman published in the Journal of Environmental Health the results of their national prevalence study of chemical sensitivity. In this national prevalence survey, 3.2% of the respondents said they had been medically diagnosed with MCS. This result suggests that over 10 million Americans are suffering from MCS. That's a number greater than the population of the state of Michigan.
Here is another place where one can find wonderful fresh air. I'm at the Santa Fe home of my film partner, Richard Startzman. With so many people suffering from MCS, it is important that the media handle this issue in a responsible way. The millions of people with MCS are ill-served by the propensity of the media to rush to Arizona to film the small community of no more than 24 people who constitute extreme cases that are not at all representative of the vast majority of people with MCS. This kind of one-stop shopping may be very convenient for journalists and filmmakers, but it results in a very distorted view of people with MCS. Depicting these outliers in a way that makes them appear weird and sensational may advance the careers of the photographers and journalists and filmmakers, but at a great cost to the millions of people with MCS who are trying to get their family, friends, and physicians to understand the condition of MCS, not to view it with disbelief. Unfortunately, the suicide rate among people with chemical sensitivity is far too high, and the failure of others to understand MCS is a factor in many of these suicides. One particularly poignant case is that of Abner Fish. Abner was a chemical engineer who worked for 3M until chemical exposures on that job made him so sick that he had to quit. Abner later testified to a government committee in Santa Fe, New Mexico, about his long search for a workplace atmosphere that he could tolerate. In my book, Amputated Lives: Coping with Chemical Sensitivity, I recorded Abner's description of the 20 different jobs he tried in his long struggle. Here is the way Abner described one of the last jobs he tried. I was flipping burgers and running a cash register, and I got a very good performance evaluation after 2 months and after 4 months. But when they hired new employees who wore perfume and kept scheduling me with them, I had to resign. 6 months after he gave this testimony, Abner Fish took his own life. As chair of the Chemical Sensitivity Foundation, I often receive emails from desperate people, and it's not easy to know what to reply. Here's one of them. I have been plagued with multiple chemical sensitivities for about 14 years, ever since the carpets in my home were cleaned and treated with a stain-repellent chemical. My biggest concern is finding an occupation and/or workplace for someone with my problems. I don't know if this is something that your organization can help me with, but I'm at my wit's end and I don't know where to turn. I need and want to work. I have started and had to quit so many wonderful jobs in the past 4 years due to becoming sick in the workplace. If you have any information on how an MCS person can obtain gainful employment, I would be deeply grateful.
My name's Kathy Gustafson. I'm a registered nurse and I'm the Director of Assisted Living at the Highlands in Topsom, Maine. We're an assisted living community and we do maintain a fragrance-free environment for the well-being of our residents that live here as well as the staff that work here. Over the years, I've been able to see what the result of lots of chemicals can do to somebody, especially somebody with a breathing disorder like COPD or asthma. Growing up, I had a brother who had asthma, and we always had to be very, very careful about what scents and environmental stimulants were around him because it could trigger an asthma attack. And if you've never witnessed an asthma attack from a young person, it is heart-wrenching. So it's been important to me to prevent other people from having that same experience. It's very easy for smells in our environment to trigger an episode for somebody who has a respiratory disorder. In an assisted living environment or in a nursing home, there are a lot of people who struggle with incontinence. And one of the things that's a result of that can be odors. And we certainly don't want somebody to walk through the front door and be greeted with unpleasant smells. So it's important for us that we make sure the residents are taken well care of. That will minimize the odors. But if we do need to use some kind of a cleaning product, we go with something that's fragrance-free and also something that's green, so it's also good for our environment. I would encourage other assisted living communities and nursing homes to explore the option of going fragrance-free in the environment. It's good for the residents, it's good for the staff, and for the visitors. We don't want to subject anybody in our community to have an exacerbation of their disease because of smells that we've put in the air. So we've eliminated air fresheners and all chemicals that we use are fragrance-free. It was not a difficult process to become fragrance-free, so please, I ask you, for the benefit of the community that you work in, to explore that option.
Everyone should have the right to work or access medical facilities in an atmosphere as free as possible from fragrances that cause them health problems.